and welcome. Raising Your Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking about the inner game of life. Tuesdays are for the mental game of sports and competition. Fridays are for the rest of our lives. So how are you doing this week? I hope things are well. I hope the weather is nice where you are. It has not been nice here. Cold, windy, rainy. Not the big storms that have happened elsewhere, thankfully, but indoor weather days for sure. It feels like temperatures well below freezing. Way too cold for the scooter, or really pretty much anything outside for me. One interesting factoid, I was reminded this week because Margaret was wondering about our garden, that the feels like temperature doesn't apply to plants. It's only an issue for humans, as far as we know. Plants are only really affected by air temperature and humidity. That was interesting. Anyway, plenty to talk about this week. The terrible House Republican budget bill, Kristi Noem's habeas corpus, faceplant, an update on Trump's flying palace, his ambush of the South African president, a fun turnabout for Dan Bongino, some good news from the Supreme Court, Pete Rose and self-mastery, and a couple of new recommendations. All right, we'll start with ups and downs. So what gave me a lift this week and what things were pulling me down? One really nice up was our daughter's high school prom last weekend. I don't know how much of this is her school or just how things are done now, but I really like that it's not so much about couples now. When I was young, that was the whole story, right? You had a date for the prom or you didn't go, and that was just insanely fraught and difficult situation. Now everyone just goes, and that seems like a big improvement to me. She has a group of friends. They spent days getting ready. One group went to lacrosse for dinner, Olive Garden. A different group went to the dance together. Everyone seemed to have a great time. And that was just lovely to see. I never actually went to the prom. I was in a band in high school, a rock band called Pegasus. And we played for most of the proms around Montana, so I avoided that whole scene. And that's another big change from when I was young, which is that we had bands for all our events. It was the only choice. There were no DJs yet. Not sure how I feel about that, but anyway, that was fun. My allergies are getting better, although you might not think that from the way I sound right now. Not as overpowering. That's a very good thing. I suspect it's the nasal inhaler kicking in. I take Zyrtec all the time, but the inhaler only in peak season. It takes a few days for that to start to work. Now that's more of a removal of a down than an actual up, but still, that's a lot better. Big one is that I got a new vocal recorded, and this was great because it's a song that I literally was afraid I was not going to be able to do. It's a little more dynamic than most of the others I've done lately, and my voice is so out of shape, not to mention the allergies taking a toll. I mean, I really did think I might never be able to do it, but I had an open time window the other day, decided to give it a try. Started out pretty rough, did not look good, but pretty soon things opened up, and I ended up with something I'm pretty happy with. Still sort of in shock that it worked. That was really nice. Also, I'm back on Noom again. You'll remember it wasn't that long ago, like just a few months. I announced that I was back on it then too. I talked about how hard it was, the plateau I was on. That one ended up beating me. It really did. The plateau continued. I never got the drop. I went like 6 to 8 weeks of hard work and just hardly dropped at all. It was really strange. And then our big trip came up and the whole thing just fell apart, right? So I've been off it for a bit now. And the last couple of weeks have been very strange. On the one hand, I'm feeling more actively upset and unhappy about how I'm feeling and looking. So the motivation is there. But at the same time, I just keep continuing to snack and have dessert and just be sort of out of control. It really is strange. Part of it's been the allergies. When you're feeling weak or sick or sort of diminished in any way, the extra work of dieting just seems impossible, at least for me. But the last few days now, felt strong enough again, started back up. So far, so good. One big difference this time is that I'm off creatine for this period. It makes no sense that would have been the problem, but it's the only thing that was different from previous times when it did work as expected. So I'm trying this time without it, and we'll see. First few days do seem different, actually. Getting the initial drop you'd expect. Again, super early. Too soon to say anything for sure, but already seeing numbers that make sense when they never did last time. So we'll keep posted on that. For my downs, this happens now and then, but nothing really stood out this week. The big things I mentioned lately are getting better. The allergies, leg pain, that's still there, but maybe not quite as bad. The Trump awfulness, plenty there, but nothing particular got me this week. So there it is. No particular downs to mention this week. All right, that's ups and downs. Next up, top stories. The big story this week has to be the tax bill that just passed the House. This is just so bad in so many ways. The bill itself is terrible. It does all the crazy things Republicans do. I mean, it's a cliche at this point. Cut taxes for rich people, cut services to everyone else, cruel, dumb cuts, kick people off Medicaid, cut food stamps for poor kids, explode the deficit. I mean, it truly makes no sense. A complete lack of any kind of leadership and responsibility and seriousness about doing what's best for the country. But that's what they do. It just boggles the mind. One item I think demonstrates this especially well. Well, actually two. The first is the cuts to SNAP, the Food Assistance Program, for low-income families. I mean, really? We're doing too much to help kids get an education? Is that our problem? Getting them fed so they can pay attention in school? Come on. How do you justify cutting kids off of food stamps? And then the second one, they want to increase the deduction on estate taxes to $30 million. It was already, I think, 25 or 27, which is pretty obscene, but they want to make it more. So the estate tax, you probably know, when people die, their estate gets passed on to their children, and it is theoretically taxable. The children didn't earn it, it's just left over from their parents. So this is a great way to generate revenue for government programs without taking anything from people while they're alive, like with an income tax. So income equality is one of the biggest problems in our country right now, along with our massive budget deficits. We need to get more wealth distributed to more people, and we need to get our spending in line. So the responsible thing to do is to raise revenue so we can give more people support, make things more fair for everyone, and get our national finances in order. This proposal does the opposite. It says for those few wealthy families who have estates worth $30 million, you can pass all that on to your kids tax-free. $25 million tax-free, that's not enough. We need to bump that up to $30 million. It is ridiculous. It is shameful. A related piece of this, again, if you were serious, you would increase IRS funding so they can collect more taxes from rich people who have more complicated returns. But again, they did the opposite. They're not serious. They just want to give more money to people who already have the most while taking money away from people who have the least. It makes no sense, but that is what they've always been about. So the bill itself is a nightmare. It hasn't passed the Senate yet. Who knows what will ultimately happen? I'm not optimistic. But this is still the statement of what House Republicans want to do, and it's awful. Quick quote from Dan Pfeiffer, one of the Pod Save America guys, quote, "It adds trillions to the deficit, guts Medicaid, slashes food stamps, raises costs on millions of families, and gives the richest Americans a massive tax cut," end quote. That's what they want to do. The second way it's bad is that because it's so clearly unserious and irresponsible, it's also hurting our economy now and in the long run. Our national credit rating, you probably saw this, was downgraded this week by Moody's. We're now one notch below the highest rating. So this means it costs us more to borrow money, which accelerates our deficit problem. It means it costs everyone more to borrow money, businesses, home buyers, everything goes up. Worst of all, it really means investors and other countries are losing confidence in us as a good and safe investment. This is just the start of that decline. And it happened before the bill was even announced. If this passes, that problem's only going to get worse, and that could easily turn into a true crisis. And it's all unnecessary and self-inflicted and just dumb. The second item this week doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but our esteemed Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, a.k.a. Ice Barbie, was testifying before Congress. Maybe you saw this. She was asked, what is habeas corpus? And her answer was, it's a constitutional right the president has to deport people. Yeah, sounds like a good answer. The problem is, it's actually the opposite of that. Habeas corpus is a constitutional right that protects people from being deported without due process. It's one of the absolute bedrocks of our constitutional system. You'd think the Secretary of Homeland Security would know that, but no, not this one. So either she really doesn't know, or she's willing to just lie about it to Congress to please the boss. Neither is good. But the bigger problem to me is that these are the kind of people we have in these powerful and important positions. There is no right and wrong, no moral compass, no core values, even to follow the Constitution. The only thing is following and praising dear leader. And we know where that leads. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, 2 agents were assigned to look into the claim that Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang, was connected to or being directed by the Venezuelan government, because that's the underlying claim that allows Trump, at least he thinks it allows him, to use the Alien Enemy Act to deport all these people he's been rounding up. That's questionable, but still, given that. So they looked into it. They came back and said, nope, no evidence of that. You'd think the Director of National Intelligence, and the President for that matter, would want actual facts, right? They would say, thank you. Now we can go forward with accurate information. But no, in Trumpistan, the only thing that matters is what's good for Trump. So rather than accept the report, she first asks them to redo it, so it says what they want. When they refuse, she fires them. Just imagine the damage that kind of thing does over time. So those are my top items this week. But here are a few more of note. It looks like the administration deported new people this week to other countries in direct violation of clear court orders. Not even a close call. So this is now a pure constitutional crisis. We're here. We'll see what happens, but something's going to have to give here, and soon. They stripped 350,000 Venezuelans of their protection against deportation. I don't understand the details with that, but that's a lot of people who thought they were safe to stay here. They were here following the rules, right? Has to be a pretty shocking situation for them. I also think they were pretty big Trump supporters in the last election. That doesn't seem smart. Never mind being cruel. Speaking of not smart, he accepted the jet. I really did not think that was going to happen. It just makes so little sense on every level. My guess now is that it just looked too weak to not accept it at all, give in to all the criticism. So they went ahead and did that, and now they'll talk like they're going to go through the process to get ready to use it, but they'll never actually do it. Because again, it's not possible to make it secure enough for the president without hundreds of millions of dollars and years of work. But even if I'm right, it'll still cost millions of dollars just to have it. That's why the Qataris have been trying to get rid of it for 5 years. It costs too much to own it. It's not a smart plane to use anymore. Oh, man. It's just super dumb every way. We'll see about that. But that did actually surprise me. Here's another one. Apparently, this is just crazy. The people who are being detained at Guantanamo, waiting to be deported, to keep them there costs $100,000 per day. Per day, per person. Not sure how that's even possible. But also, not sure how they can justify spending that kind of money. It's so outrageous and wasteful and stupid. Where are the Doge bros when you need them? Speaking of Doge, massive stores of food that would feed millions of people around the world is left to rot in storage because of USAID cuts. This is 100% on Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, killing the poorest children in the world. At the same time, we're spending $100,000 a day on each person in Guantanamo. We had another Oval Office ambush this week. This was embarrassing. The president of South Africa visited. Trump, as you know, is convinced that white South Afrikaners are being murdered in mass violence. That's why he granted them refugee status. while denying it for non-white people who are actual refugees in actual danger. So he confronts the president of South Africa in the Oval Office about this during their meeting. He's holding up all these photos. He's got this stack of pictures, holding them up for the cameras, pictures of people who've been killed in graves full of white farmers. The problem is the pictures aren't from South Africa. They're from the Congo, and it's not mass murder of white farmers. It's just insane. He seems to genuinely believe the pictures are real, but they're not. And he's making an absolute fool of himself and of all of us in the process. Last one. On the way back from his big trip to the Middle East, the cavalcade of corruption, he takes the time in the middle of the night to tweet out a call for investigations of Bruce Springsteen and Oprah and Beyonce, and I think even more than that, for being paid to support the Kamala Harris campaign. Never mind the impeachable offense of the president directing the DOJ to investigate political opponents, how petty and small do you have to be to even think about things like that? You're the president of the United States. Don't you have bigger things to worry about than things that are in the past? And you won. I mean, for God's sakes. I never stop being amazed at what a truly small and terrible person he is. But even with all that, there is still good news to be had. The Supreme Court, just yesterday, blocked the creation of a religious charter school, I think in Oklahoma. It's a narrow victory that might not last long. It likely only happened because Amy Coney Barrett recused herself. A similar case in another state might win. But for now, we've dodged that bullet of having taxpayer money pay for religious schools. Got to be happy about that. Also, this was especially fun. Dan Bongino, Deputy Secretary of Defense, bomb-throwing, right-wing podcaster, conspiracy theorist. One of the big theories on the right is that Jeffrey Epstein didn't actually kill himself in jail, but was murdered to protect powerful people from being exposed. Bongino himself has dabbled in that theory. But now, since he has access to all the information, he came out this week and said, absolutely no, it was a suicide. I've seen the file. He killed himself. And what happened? He has been savaged on the right for it. And that is just hilarious. I mean, you think that this guy, of all people, with all his followers and all his credibility with the MAGA crowd, they would at least listen to him. But no, once you're in the cult, you don't listen to anything that contradicts what you already believed. They are calling Dan Bongino a deep state traitor. Now, that is actually happening, and that is just fantastic in a warped way. The CEO of Walmart this week said they're going to have to raise prices because of the tariffs. It's not good news to have higher prices, of course, but it is good for people to see the consequences of Trump's terrible policies. And the head of ABC News resigned this week because of how the company is bending to the administration. Again, not good necessarily, but good because courage is courageous. They're small wins for sure, but they add up, and we should allow ourselves at least a moment to feel good about them. All right, that's Top Stories. Reminder, if you're enjoying the show, please take a moment, give us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's a big help in reaching new listeners. So thank you for that. All right, next up, Inner Game Gold. Last week, we talked about the quote from the Raise Your Inner Game book. The height of a person's success is gauged by their self-mastery, from Leonardo da Vinci, because that is the core of why we want to do this work, of getting control of our inner game. This week, a little break from tradition, I want to say more about this same idea because it came up for me again this week in a different context. Last week, it was to point out that for parents or coaches looking to help their kids with their mental game, rather than looking for the right thing to say, you really need to help them develop self-mastery, to learn the specific skills to get control over the mental game. Sayings alone, concepts alone don't do it. They need practical self-mastery skills. This week, I wrote about this for the Tuesday pod, but the context is Pete Rose, the great baseball player, who got banned from baseball for betting on his team, and because of that has not been eligible for the Hall of Fame. Even though he has the all-time record for the most hits, it's likely no one will ever pass him. So he clearly deserves to be in the Hall of Fame as a player, but may never get there because of his gambling. Now, the story this week was that his lifetime ban was lifted because he passed away last year, so he actually is eligible now. But the point was that his lack of self-mastery cost him tremendously. Again, the quote is, "The height of a person's success is gauged by their self-mastery." This couldn't be a more clear illustration of that. His success, his legacy is literally limited because of his lack of self-mastery. In the moment, when he felt the urge to place that bet, knowing it was wrong and what it would cost him, he did it anyway. The pull to do it was stronger than whatever resistance he might have felt against it. That is the definition of a lack of self-mastery. And just think how different things would have been for him and his family and his team and his legacy if he had been able to resist that. Now, I don't want to dismiss the power of addictions. I understand true addictions are rarely about willpower. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying his story is a great illustration of the truth of this quote. The height of a person's success is gauged by their self-mastery. If we want to be successful in the ways that really matter the most, doing work we're proud of, having good relationships, being happy and fulfilled with our lives, being the kind of person we want to be, the key to that is to learn how to get control of our thoughts, our emotions, and our physical impulses. Of course, that's what our book, Raise Your Inner Game, and our Sports Academy training for athletes teach. You can check those out at raiseyourinnergame.com if you haven't already. But that is Inner Game Gold for this week. Next up, our challenge of the week. Last week, we did a self-mastery, self-evaluation. You thought about your current levels of self-mastery, physical, emotional, intellectual, where you're strong and weak in those areas. This week, let's work on those. For any areas where you felt you were pretty strong, take a moment, give yourself permission to feel good about that. It's important. It matters. It's a real asset that you should be proud of. And then for areas where you feel you could use some work, what might you do to be stronger in that area? Typically, there are two paths for this, and both can help. One is to remove triggers that cause you trouble. The other is to strengthen your ability to deal with those triggers. So, for example, you crave salty snacks. Asking for a friend. The remove trigger path is to keep them out of sight and ideally out of the house altogether, right? Don't buy them. If someone else buys them, keep them somewhere where you don't see them all the time. So the trigger is seeing them. You remove that by keeping them out of sight. The strengthen your ability to deal with them path is to do some work, like we talk about in the book and the trainings, to build your willpower. So first, you learn to observe the mechanism when the urges come up and to depersonalize those urges, and then you practice resisting them when they do. And that same approach works for all three areas. So work on that this week. Think about which areas need some work. Think about some specific things that trigger you in that area and come up with some practical things you can do to try to improve your ability to deal with those triggers. That's a fun one. All right, that's our challenge this week. Next up, highly recommended. I finished Fallen Angel by Daniel Silva. Always satisfying, easy to recommend that. Started a new book that just came out from Michael Connell called Nightshade. He's a great writer, again, in the crime thriller genre. He's created some of my all-time favorite characters. Already enjoying this one quite a bit. For shows, I'm still enjoying Murderbot on Apple TV. I think I've decided I'm not recommending that for Margaret and Francis. Not that they wouldn't like it, but they wouldn't like it enough to make it something we work on watching together. Because that's a lot of work to coordinate that and wait for it and all that stuff anyway. Not quite to that level. On the other hand, finally getting to The Last of Us, Season 2, we're all four watching that together. And that one's definitely worth it. Though it is also a very tense show. I can imagine Margaret deciding at some point she doesn't need that much more attention in her life. I also just watched the finale of Andor this week on Disney+. I'm sad to be done with that. It was a really good, satisfying show. Highly recommend that one too. For a product, I've started playing a new game. It's called Bracket City from Atlantic Magazine, though you don't have to be a subscriber to play. I actually hated it at first because I didn't understand how it worked and it wasn't fun. But now that I do, I've added it to my daily game routine and look forward to it quite a bit. I'll put a link in the notes to that if you want to check it out. But you could just search on Bracket City and find it too, I'm sure. All right, that is our show for this week. Thank you as always for joining. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a great week. Keep up the good work. I'll see you next time.